Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us for another episode of I Want to Know, the show dedicated to the town of North Branford and the people that make it what it is. Awesome town to be. My name is Dan Armin, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to my guest, Alex DeFrancesco of DeFrancesco Farms. How you doing?
Doing well, Dan.
Thank you very much for joining me. I know you're really busy, but this is like the lull before the growing season, which you'll have absolutely no time at all.
Oh yeah, it's coming. And Easter on its way with all the greenhouses, and then right into the spring, and then right into the fields.
Wow. Why don't you start by telling me a little bit of history about your family's farm? I know 1907 or so they settled in North Branford. What was it, North Branford back then? No, what was it?
Yeah, it was North Branford back then. So it was 1907. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother came over from Italy, and it was Antonio and Philomena. And they came, and they were actually the first household on Auger Road.
Okay.
And they had it was small parcel of land. It was all livestock, classic farming, no tractors yet.
Right.
And little by little, each generation we built up the farm. With my grandfather, he had a load of brothers and sisters. Some stayed on the farm, some moved off into adjacent towns, did their own farms, and the family always helped each other out. With my father's generation, my father and mother started doing the greenhouses.
Your parents started in about the 70s, correct?
60s and 70s.
Okay.
My father really started taking a hold, and my grandparents used to go to Florida in the wintertime, and my parents would do a lot of the greenhouses, continue with the fields, and then with my brothers and I, we expanded the greenhouses and went from the small Quonset hoop houses that you classically would see to the larger, the Westbrook greenhouses they can handle the snow load. They just are
engineered
practical.
farming.
The enginered farming,
you
the
technology. You don't have to worry about disease.
Exactly.
You really have tripled your output by 3 times. Right? I mean,
if not more.
Okay.
Especially with you're utilizing the space that used to be within those greenhouses, the small hoop houses. Now it's all continuous, and so you gain all that space with the hanging baskets, the floor space, whether it's a patio pot or a bedding plant, whatever it might be. And now you're heating the same space rather than trying to focusing on heating multiple small spaces that have a lot more surface area. So you're being energy efficient. And then we took that energy efficiency about 20 years ago or so and installed a bio furnace. And that bio furnace takes wood chips that normally would go into a landfill and utilizes that instead of oil or gas.
Wow.
To heat the whole range of greenhouses.
And it's completely engineered, like the atmosphere, irrigation.
Yep.
What do you do any outside though? Outside of the greenhouses, do you use the new plastic technology and stuff?
Yes. So actually, in the fields, when the black plastic rows and the drip tape first came around about 30 years ago or so, we were one of the first farms in the state to utilize that technology.
Wow, okay.
And since then, almost every farm now that's on a large scale commercial basis has converted over to that for conserving water. Getting the water right to the crop's roots rather than doing overhead irrigation that's lost to evaporation rather than transpiration.
Mm-hmm.
And
Transpiration,
yeah.
What does that mean?
Water loss, as the plant uses the water, it goes up from the root into the stem, the leaves, and the water loses from the leaves.
Okay. And so you trap that, you're saying?
No, so that the plant actually utilizes all that water.
Oh, all of it, okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go to waste. Okay,
Correct.
I've never heard that word before. That's
Yeah.
cool. What products do you grow?
So let's do the greenhouses first. So with the greenhouses, we do the bedding plants, the patio pots, hanging baskets, ale range. So like right now, as I mentioned Easter before, so all the bulbs, all those Easter plants, we're getting ready. We've been shipping off to the different wholesalers. And that will vary from year to year when Easter falls.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a blessing, other times it's right before Mother's Day.
Wow.
So you're doing both the spring plants of Mother's Day and Easter right at the same time.
All at the same time.
Almost like this year.
Okay.
And with that, about April and May, that's greenhouse season. That will go into a lull in June. We'll go into the fields. Usually in May, we'll start planting the fields. And with the crops, we do a lot of annual crops. So vegetables, the peppers, squash, corn, all those, and then we'll do tomatoes, and that's about 130 acres that we'll do in the summertime of annual
Not
crops.
including the greenhouses, or including the greenhouses?
Not including the greenhouses.
And how much acreage do the greenhouses take up?
They're about a little less than 8 acres.
Okay.
When you put all the different buildings together that we use for the greenhouse purpose.
Okay. How do you determine what you'll plant the following year?
It depends on each sector of the farm. So with the greenhouses, it's usually with our customers, what worked well the previous year, what are the bread and butter crops, some new one-offs you might get, or a different technology, or if certain products they no longer make. Now you have to find a substitute for that.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes they take, sometimes they're a dud.
Okay.
And also too, demands on, do we have new customers? Do we have to increase productivity, or do we maintain the same? Or like with this year, Easter, it's late. So most people won't get Easter plants, but they'll get the spring plants.
I see.
So our normal Easter production is about half of what it is if it's on a normal time of the year or if it's early.
Okay, but you probably prefer for it to be late, though. Or does it not matter?
Yes and no, because it actually does help us conserve heat in the wintertime.
Okay.
Because we don't have to have that space heated for those plants.
I see.
That normally could be either the heat's low or it's just enough so the pipes don't crack.
Okay.
For the crops in the summertime, usually it's the same. We'll do some specialty crops like the farm stands. We'll change that every year.
Where is your farm stand, by the way? Just so people know.
It's right on 22. It's just right down from the police station.
Okay.
And it's actually right across from the hop yard.
Okay, very good. On 22, everybody, just so you know.
And so some of those special crops that we'll do for the farm stand, I love doing. I love getting like the odd seeds, and one of my brothers is like, really, you're gonna do this? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, just do it. It's fun.
Have your brothers like given you a little corner to play with and experiment with?
That's kind
That's
of
just
how
Alex's area, and we're not gonna mess with that.
That's kind of how the hop yard evolved years back. And then I even did some like raspberry and blackberry bushes, just have fun with that. But the main crops is pretty much what does the market demand. Now, if you look at kale, 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't give kale away.
Right.
Now with all the health drinks and everything, all the farms are growing it. You look at the farmers markets, everyone has kale. So it also depends on how from every 5 to 10 years the demand in the grocery stores and what are the new health
Market
fads.
changes.
Exactly.
So you have to accommodate yourself.
And that's in every sector, so.
Is all of your land in one location, or is it separated?
They're different parcels. So the main farm is on 22 with the greenhouses and a lot of the fields around it. We have another main parcel that's across from the farm stand. That was the old Livingston's farm. And that's actually where the old footy house used to be in town.
Okay.
So that actually goes all the way up to Tilcon. And
Oh, wow,
we have
that's far.
Oh yeah. And then we have another parcel that's on Village Street.
Okay.
That we call the sand pit, because that's one of the parcels that the state used to excavate for 91 and 95 when they were building the main interstate roads.
Okay.
So we have that parcel there, and then we rent some land as well, so we could rest our own land.
Can you explain to people what that means? Yeah, go into that.
I know there's a lot of terminology I use that's normal, and then it's like I don't think.
I'll catch
Yeah.
you because I don't know much about this, so I'll stop you mid-sentence.
It's all good. So resting land, to properly rest farmland, is not to actually cultivate it for 3 to 5 years and just let the cover crop and Mother Nature do its thing. Resting actually allows the nutrients to replenish, and for any possibly bad bugs that might be in the soil to be go through multiple life cycles, and because there's no host plant on that piece of land.
It has no food source.
It has no food source, so then they'll die out. And that's particularly been problematic in the past 10, 15 years, especially with ATVs that have been driving from parcel of different farmland
From parcel
to
to
townland.
parcel.
Exactly. It'd be the same aspect of if you're trying to rest a piece of land or trying to preserve like a lake. When people take their boats out of a lake and go to another body of water, they tell you to wash the vehicles. It's the same concept. You're taking that soil from that parcel of land that could be infected and bringing it to another. So when a farmer's truly trying to rest his land, he probably is not thinking, oh, the ATV is over there, they're ruining the land. And down the road, that could cost them tens of thousands of dollars a year just per acre.
But even if you're not trying to rest the land, you know, if you plan on growing crop, you know, ATVs can leak fluids that
Yes.
can contaminate the soil.
And even those lands, if they're just being hayed, that could get on the hay that's going to be cut.
It's going to be feed.
It's going to be feed, and it can make the animals sick.
Okay. So, very good point there. So go ahead. So I interrupted you. So one more question about resting, though. So do you rest in different stages? Like, does the land go for a certain amount of time that's productive, and then you may have a disease, and then does that determine that you have to rest it?
Yes. So normally we'll rotate crops first,
Okay.
so that way certain crops will use different nutrients in the soil. And when you find that land really needs to truly rest for a few years, that's when we'll just not plant anything, not till it, and let it do its thing.
Okay. How has your land changed over time, though? I mean, has environmental impacted your land? Climate change? Has that changed the product that you've been successful with?
More so, I'd say, on how the products and how we maintain the products in the fields.
Okay.
Greenhouses, it's more of a controlled environment.
Yeah, that's all engineered.
It's all engineered, but even with the greenhouses, when you have the cold, cool springs, you just have products sitting there. So you're not getting the sales like you'd hope to. And that's happened like the past few years we've seen. In the fields, normally you have nice summers, but we've noticed like August has been cooler. And then you look just at last year, and August was a monsoon going into September.
Right.
And with that brought so much disease into not just all of Connecticut, but a lot of parts of the country. So we had maybe 2 or 3 crops of peppers rather than having 4 or 5 crops of peppers. And a lot of the pepper plants that we had on our farm last year pretty much were all dead by middle to end of August. And normally they would go until start of October.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, what do you do on the off season then?
So off season, years ago, used to be downtime for us, a little maintenance with equipment, new projects.
Determining what you'll plant and where you'll plant it and that type of stuff.
Exactly, more book work, getting all your orders, seed orders, plant orders, and setting all that up, that timeline, but still being diligent and getting your stuff done. Now, with Easter and particularly the greenhouses, you're always doing something, whether it's maintenance or just getting that right thing going in the greenhouse or the fields, or notice, well, like how you mentioned before, we're resting this field. Now, is there anything in the fields we have to do? Do we have to do maintenance on the boundaries?
Okay.
And the soil is now frozen, so we can actually do that.
Okay.
Whereas now in the springtime, as we saw a few weeks ago, you can even get a tractor in the fields because of the mud.
Right. It'll be quicksand.
Yeah.
How has the technology, you were mentioning maintenance, how has the technology changed over time? I know when your great-grandparents got here, they just had cattle.
Yeah.
And then in the early 1900s, they had tractors. But now, what have you seen in your lifetime versus where you see us going?
So, as you mentioned, we've had technology come up over the past century.
Right.
More and more
Things
the
were simple and
innovations.
effective, and then we got into technology, which is good, but then maintenance intensive, and then you can't maintain it because it's too complicated.
Exactly. And technology can be a blessing at times, and it helps whether it's certain farm equipment in the fields, different techniques for tilling rather than just your basic harrow or your plow. They combine them.
And we mentioned the irrigation.
And then the irrigation, exactly. But also, too, some of those smart tractors, I guess you could call them, that have all different computer systems.
Okay. Like GPS type of?
Some have GPS in them. Yes, the big ones out west that one of my sister-in-law's family has a farm out there that has thousands and thousands of acres. You just push a button, the GPS goes, and it's tilling or it's going through a combine of the grain or the corn, whatever it might be out there. Well, that you can't do here.
Right.
It's more man-driven, this and that. But with that smart technology, there's some tractors they have now that if you're trying to warm up in the wintertime, it will sense that it's too cold, so you can't warm the tractor up, so it'll turn itself off.
It kind of sounds like a human.
Yeah.
I've said that to myself. It's too cold. I'm done.
So, like I said, it could be a blessing, but also it has its
Right.
downfalls. But with the greenhouses, the technology is amazing, where we could get a lot of it, if not all of it, animated. You program the sensors, the flood benches that are in the greenhouses. You just do, this is zone 1, 2, 3, and so on. So that way you don't need the manpower to self-water with the hoses. As long as you time it right and you adjust for the weather. If it's a cloudy week, water less. If it's really hot out, you might have to increase it more. But essentially you could have just like one person in charge of that and you're all set to go. Whereas years ago we had to have multiple people going around watering, making sure the plants were just surviving.
Right, and then plus you're saving resources as well. Water you're saving. It's totally effective the way we use it now. And when it comes to planting, I bet you your technology now is really engineered and efficient planting. When before somebody had to go along these rows, right, and just what did you throw seeds and stuff, and now it's really methodical how it's done.
Exactly. So
less
especially
wasted
in the fields,
product too.
It's a less wasted product, and of course, you're always combating with the wildlife. But at least you could sow it, you could get everything properly done, and usually Mother Nature is good. There's sometimes wildlife will impact it, but that varies from year to year, just like with the weather. So.
Okay, so then you're a farmer, Alex. How did you get into brewing, which is the next big step for you, man? Was it the off season that you started tasting beer since you had just paperwork to do and say, I could do this better?
So I've always enjoyed craft beer, even before we had the big craft beer boom in the 2000s here. I got into brewing when we only had like 5 or 6 breweries in the state of Connecticut, and it was a hobby. And I actually would do it even in like the peak season. I'd get done with the fields and I'd go brew
in
a batch
garage.
in the garage, in the barn, and I'd use my friends and family as guinea pigs.
Okay.
To experiment, because I always loved cooking my entire life.
Oh, okay.
Coming from an Italian family, you're gonna cook.
Right. It's
You're gonna enjoy the cooking and you're gonna learn to cook.
You better make a sauce.
Yep. So I see it as a form of cooking science, and then being a farmer, I always love using local.
Okay.
And with combining that and the Italian heritage, you tend to be like a pinch of this or a little bit of that, and you just evolve the recipes. And back when I got into brewing, I was wondering, well, why can't we grow some of these ingredients here?
Yeah, because initially when you started doing it yourself, you had to order, what did you order, hops online?
Hops online.
Was it hard to get Connecticut hops?
There were no Connecticut hops.
It didn't exist?
They did not exist. Back in 2012, other than some people's backyards, you didn't have any commercial yards.
Okay.
Back in 2012, 2013, we had a push for the ag stations to do some research. Can we actually grow
ag stations?
The Connecticut Agricultural Experimental Stations.
Okay.
So there's 2 main ones in the state of Connecticut that will do research projects on different commercial cash crops. Is it profitable for a farmer to do this, or we have this disease now, how can we find technique to combat it?
Okay. Are they up at Yukon?
There's one in Windsor, and then there's one in Lockwood. Lockwood over in Hamden.
Okay.
And great facilities. They've been a load of knowledge and help for not just the hops, but all aspects of farming in the state for decades.
So you had an ongoing relationship with them?
Yes.
So then you went to them, you approached them, you said, look, we can't find hops anywhere. What can we do about this?
So us, a few farmers, the brewers were like, well, we want to use local. Because some of the brewers that already had breweries in the state are like, well, we want these crops in Connecticut. Just like you go to a farmer's market, you want to buy local,
right.
They wanted to buy local. And they found out, well, none's grown here.
Wow.
Even the malts. The brewing
It's never
malts
been
weren't.
grown here? Or it was grown here in history and then...
It was grown here in history back in the 1800s.
Okay.
New York actually used to be the capital of hops in the world back in the 1800s.
Wow, okay.
And then Mother Nature happened.
Yeah.
Disease, mildew came in because you had a giant monocrop of hops for acres upon acres. The whole Hudson Valley used to be hops. Mm-hmm. And Mother Nature came in, wiped it out, and went out west. So Yakima Valley, Pacific Northwest is now the hop capital of the world. Long story short, You have remnants of where those hop yards used to be in New England.
Okay.
Devil's Hop Yard, you have a few of them around the state. There's some on the shoreline as well. And now when we're working with the ag station, we're finding, okay, what hops can you grow here? Working with New York and Vermont, we have colleagues that have been doing research in those states 10 years, 15 years longer than us, seeing what works for their states. Even some varieties that work for their states don't work for our state.
Okay.
So we took that, we worked with that, and then for our particular farm, I planted the varieties I love brewing with.
Okay.
Because
what do you prefer?
I'm more noble hops and more the old-fashioned European ones, whether it's German or English or the Czech. And knowing down the road I might want to do a farm brewery, I'm like, no, we're going to plant this. Mm-hmm. So then here's the challenge. As you mentioned, well, do you have your own part of the farm or your own sector, like go plant here? And I had to demonstrate to my parents, we can actually grow hops in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So our first yard was one of the first of 3 yards in the state of Connecticut. And then we did the addition the year after that was a little less than 2 acres. And those are the oldest plants, commercial plants in the state.
Wow.
Because our yard, we didn't have to replant. The first other 2 yards had to replant or redo because they chose varieties that weren't suited for Connecticut.
Yeah, they didn't take.
Climate, exactly.
Okay.
So we're happy to have that.
Yeah. Success there, and then you say, okay, well now this is working out well in the garage. Let's kind of move forward with this.
Yep.
You decide, well, let's try and do a brewery, which is really a big endeavor.
It is, and before that, I had to help create the legislation at the state level.
And
for
that
farm
is
breweries.
right. Okay, right. So that's really interesting to me. So because it didn't exist, or because it wouldn't allow you, was it a roadblock or a wall? I mean, or did it just not exist, and you had to write the legislation from scratch?
It didn't exist, but we took what New York and other states had, and we worked with the Department of Ag to put together the legislation. To then, it took us about 2 years up in Hartford to get it approved. Department of Ag was a huge help. They helped ask the farmers, well, what can you do? They asked me, being the president of Connecticut Hop Growers Association, what can we raise to supply the brewers to help encourage and keep this booming business of breweries in our state.
Sustainability.
Sustainability.
Yeah.
And actually, because of the passage of that legislation, we had the first malt facility open up.
Where was that?
Up in Windsor.
Okay.
So the malt facility is up in Windsor, and they actually supply over 60 breweries in the state now.
What does a malt facility even do? Sorry.
So they take the grains from the fields.
Yeah.
They'll roast those into different degrees.
Each farmer brings his own.
Each farmer can.
Okay.
They mostly do their own, but they do work with other farmers as well. And it's a whole nother cooking science.
Okay.
And that's one I looked at. I'm like, I'll let them do it.
All right.
I'll brew with it, but I'll let them make the products.
Okay.
And so we'll take that now, and we'll brew with the grains, and we'll brew with our hops and other ingredients. And
that's
we'll
what
make our own
produces
beer.
the different formulations, right? Is that it? The combination, or you modify? All right, you go ahead.
It's all good. So the ingredients are just one step of the brewing process, but then you throw in temperature. You throw in time.
Okay.
And there's so many variables. Just like all the variables that go into if you're making a loaf of bread at home, those same variables could go into making a batch of beer.
Okay.
And that's how you get all your different styles. Whether it's a lager, an ale, a sour, a stout, an IPA. It's just following your recipe, and that's your products.
Wow, awesome.
It's just like you could have 20 people make a chocolate chip cookie, and it could all be different.
Right. So so now you're moving in. You have the legislation all taken care of.
At state level, it's all taken care of. That got passed in 2017. We then took it to the town as a text amendment, and that took us 7 months with the town to get that passed. So then we could just put in our permit with the town to do the farm brewery.
Okay.
That we had our blessing now on our application with the farm brewery back in January, and we've gone essentially full steam now with trying to get the brewery open for the summer.
So tell us about the location.
The location is just down the street from the main farm. It's right on 22. It's actually the old Policheski farmhouse. So early 1800s that house is from. And what we're trying to do is to restore it and breathe life into it as the old tavern in the town. Because the old footy house that I mentioned before was one of the original taverns in town. and that's actually where one of my brothers live.
Wow.
And looking at it, you can actually see the old beams in his house and who stayed there, and around they found like bottles and all this there. But I wasn't allowed to kick my brother out of his house for the farm brewery.
So he's doing his work though, stay there.
Yeah.
He has to put in his part.
So we're essentially taking that concept with the pole and beam look and making a gathering place for the town that's right in the middle of Northford and North Brantford. And having that warming aspect where people could bring their food. We'll have food trucks there. We have restaurants in town that are making their own delivery menus just for us. And so that way people could just go there, relax, enjoy Mother Nature.
Nice. Are you going to have an outdoor area as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll have an outdoor area, patio, and one of the walls has a load of windows, so you can actually see into the fields, and you can actually see the tree line where the farm river is.
Oh man, I look forward to this.
Yeah.
Are you going to be? So you mentioned that you had found a bunch of old products that had been buried over time. Are you going to save these and have these a part of your showcase?
On that parcel of land, and actually at the old tavern, the old footy house, between the barns and then excavating, there's old sharpening stones, horseshoes, old equipment that we're restoring that will be on display at the brewery. Some will be hanging on the wall, some will be mounted, some actually will be out in the yard. So trying to showcase that history, but also we're working with the Policheski family that approached us to do, we're going to do a page on our website going with the history of the family, that parcel of land, and how we're transitioning that into the brewery. That's
going to be wonderful. Are you going to be packaging up and selling your formulas out of this?
It's mainly in-house.
Okay.
So we'll have our serving tanks, but also we'll do the growler fills.
Okay.
Like you normally go to a brewery. Eventually we'll do bottles. So we'll be able to package bottles on site and people can buy bottles there. We're going to do some kegging. So we have some restaurants and bars around town, adjacent towns that have always supported us, and we wanted to support them and provide product for them, but it's mostly going to be in-house sales.
Okay. Do you eventually, what is your long-term vision for this new endeavor? Do you plan on, bottling, this product and selling it across the world, or do you want to keep it local? Keep it manageable? I don't know.
Well, like you said, keep it local, keep it manageable.
Yeah.
So I always saw this as a branch of the farm, diversifying the farm, and keeping it small, keeping it as a nice gathering place for the townspeople.
Right.
Because I foresee that you'll see a lot of towns, not just in Connecticut, but in the other states in the country, that they'll have their own brewery that's like the gathering place.
Right.
And it'll go back to how it used to be in the 1700s. And that's the whole concept of Stewart's Land Brewery, is we're using the local ingredients that you used to be able to get by horse and wagon.
And this is where this is going to be a place where we can, understand that we all have this in common, our town in common, and it'll be nice to be able to see your neighbors, for a social gathering. This is going to be a wonderful thing you're providing for us.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. What do you like most about the town? I mean, this is a big deal. Keeping it local is, really admirable.
Keeping it local, promoting the agriculture. We are a farming community. Showing how our businesses could work with the land and produce a great product, but also preserve the product, preserve the land.
And the character of the land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the main concepts of the whole name of Stewart's Land Brewery, and what we're trying to do, hopefully this year, if not next year, is to be the first brewery in the state of Connecticut where all our waste from the brew house side will be recycled on site.
Fantastic.
So the waste from the grains, the water, everything.
Wow. Total sustainability.
Exactly.
Okay, when do you plan on opening, real quick?
We're hoping July, maybe August for the brewery.
I wish you all the best.
Thank
you for your time. I really appreciate this. And I look forward to you hopefully coming back and we can go into how it's going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for I Want to Know. Contact me at danarminnb@gmail.com with any ideas or suggestions for future shows. Thank you, and have a good day.